Around Dinarland. From Phil Lyman. All those predictions of a quick defeat of ISIS came to my mind as I typed May in the subject line. The latest statement from their military of no more than 3 weeks to clear Mosul seems like a real possibility this month. Praying it is so. At Jester's place. From Jester. I will tell you a secret though. Peeps like S. and the rest of the gurus are all waiting on the next thing. Saying there is progress or waiting on this next thing. They don't get it. Because it is all done. From what I am told, it is adjustments taking place. Everything is signed off and ready to roll. But the banking system has to adjust. And that is what we are watching and telling you about. They are not telegraphing those moves. But you see the results of it. So just keep watching that. How long have I been saying that it is not going to go the way they think? From Rebel Girl Jester, you have always said that. From Mary Sunshine Jester, thank you for sharing that. From Jester Mary Sunshine, just trying to keep your eye on the big picture. On KTFA. From Agidad 77, well, it appears they do have an understanding. They've studied their history and took notes. Bravo for them. Get it started. Roll the ball, start the motion and watch how the plan comes together. Pay attention to Abadi, he's got the director's baton. He directs. Everyone else follows, he knows the script, it's been furnished to him in triplicate, be the deal done and awaits his final bow to the world, hold the applause until the end, in my opinion. Aloha Randy. From Don 961. Private sector development key way to handle a lot of talk about Alder Muftard, the private sector in Iraq, participation in economic decision making and contributing effectively to the comprehensive and sustainable development, but unfortunately not yet touched on the ground, only promises, not the private sector to grant the opportunity they deserve, and got the support he promised, even the despair reached by some extent, to some extent the belief that the Iraqi private sector will not list him under the mentality that is still controlling some Al-Qaralagit Seda makers, emanating from the lack of confidence in this sector and the desire to keep a marginal role. Who is responsible for that? Is it the government? Or parliament? Or the private sector itself? Or self-conditions and objectivity surrounding this sector and restricted his movement and propel him to mislead him from almost total deficit? What are the return of the soul to this sector, which was behind the Renaissance and progress precipitant countries of the world in the forefront of European countries after World War II requirements? Hundreds of decisions and recommendations, studies, and articles stressed the importance of the private sector and the current and subsequent impact on the process of economic development in Iraq, especially in addressing the triad of evil: poverty, unemployment, and illiteracy. However, the ground has not really practical steps or a road map to open the doors to this sector in order to rise in turn leading leadership in development, and contributes to making social and Al-Qaralagit Seda in the country. The Iraqi private sector has been initiated by one, in terms of his sense of responsibility entrusted to him, to announce the emergence of the Iraqi Economic Forum, which was formed about 2 years ago, brought together 12 federations and organizations affiliated to this sector, including the Iraqi Private Banks Association, in a bold and unprecedented step to unify efforts and close ranks and enter into the arena of Iraqi economic work under one title, to draw N0 might, parliament, and society in general to the potential of this sector, which includes millions of Iraqis working in various aspects of agricultural, industrial, service and craft life. But this mighty move so far did not take the legal form of constitutional, because of the other sub-buginathm and identities, which prevented the completion of this project Kabirov. We are still hoping to see a light in the future. It behooves us as we go into the reasons for declining private Duralta guidance of self-criticism for ourselves before anyone else, departing from the cons of some affiliated to this sector, including the hathm behind the quick profit projects, and not seeking to establish a strong and broad material base through which they can fill the vacuum caused by the absence of the public sector after in 2003, let alone rely on import everything from abroad, in the absence of an industrial base and national agricultural strong, and keep pace with orientation and with rentier consumer, as well as weak Massadraltamol and the inability to confrontation and competition with foreign product and agile communication with economic institutions global. All of these and other factors have made the Iraqi private sector semi-helpless, despite the presence of subjective and objective factors that have invested in the current advancement of its reality. Here, we say to be the contribution of the private sector in the economic reform process and in the work of the relevant government committees and in the preparation of public budgets, the country, and in foreign visits to senior Iraqi officials, similar to foreigners who are keen to accompany representatives of the private sector companies with them during their visits to other countries. Kabar al-Mzayalan. With all these negatives, the participation of the private sector in making a Al-Quralagit Seda in Iraq is not elusive, and should not be seen as the private sector is unable to the national economy, which has approved a constitutional administration. It must be openness in the framework of a market economy prepared by the path of economic and commercial activity in Iraq map theory. The front of the private sector, many opportunities, and large areas for the promotion of industry, agriculture, trade and services, will not be achieved only through the formation of an Iraqi Supreme Economic Council consists of RIBs 3, the government, the parliament. The private sector would develop a strategic economic and fiscal plans for the country, short, medium and long term. It paints a road map to remove them from the financial and economic tragic situations, and to benefit from the experiences of countries that have passed similar circumstances. We must not forget that the structures of Europe after World War is not the Marshall Plan alone, but the European private sector's innovative, active and effective in the heart of a few years. Dmira Harb to Imar, President of the Iraqi Association of Private Banks. From Dawn 961, another huge battle awaits Abadi after Mosul and the elimination of Daesh from Iraq, dealing with and bringing to light all the corrupt politicians, party members, and government officials who have used their positions and contacts to greatly enrich themselves, and steal humongous amounts of money from the country. He has solicited the help of American experts, who have the lists of who is guilty, and how much they pilfered. If you've noticed how hard it is to get a quorum in Parliament, to be able to pass important laws, and get things accomplished in a timely manner, could it be some of these MPs are trying to keep a low profile and stay out of the limelight? Because they know what they did, and know what's coming, after Mosul. I don't believe their armed militias will be able to protect them anymore. They stole more than just Iraq's money, MO. According to many articles. Journal, reveal Abadi, a plan to overthrow the state networks. Deep post Daesh Baghdad Sahar al-Rubai battle of Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi with his political opponents seem under constant large ramifications in the political aspects of the conflict, which will reflect negatively on the political scene ahead of the elections. Abadi opponents of Sunnis and Shiites will be on a date with a plan intended to implement prime minister networks back to overthrow large figures, which means necessarily clash with it. It says close to Abadi. Sources said the plan will depend on two media and it will be more than 1,500 site and the page they are attacking the corrupt man necessarily opponents electoral, judicial, and second part will depend on the opening of investigations will not be easily closed, as is currently happening without the overthrow of those involved. Sources confirm that the media campaign will be preceded by the judicial declaration and the duration of the brief may extend to 2 months, which publishes documents and information thoroughly and that the U.S. administration supports these steps. The sources add that the Abadi team created a judicial specialist in the field of money laundering and the follow-up financial resources and remittances to follow up the money resulting from the suspicious transactions and that this process will be ahead of the elections as part of the electoral media campaign for the Prime Minister and polish his image. In this side of the National Alliance MP Ali Al-Abdurrah revealed that the U.S. administration to provide the Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi names top whale corruption and how much money they had stolen. He said al-Badra said, the U.S. administration provided the names of some Abadi corrupt senior figures and how much money al-Mzraouk in the next stage will face Abadi severe pressure to prevent the trend towards this file. He added that, Abadi is able to fight corruption and involving corrupt prisons, but he faces a counter and a strong campaign inside the parliament by some deputies, he said. When you try to dismiss any personal corrupt soon beneficiaries come out decisions and measures to counter. He said Al-Badri, the Prime Minister is determined to open Al-Fasad file although many people bet on non-Abadi's ability to edit areas days especially village, but earn Al-Rahan, and now betting on its inability to fight corruption, and we believe that he will succeed. He also promised that he has plan. The completion of DACE and the liberalization of land will go towards Daesh corruption. Abadi does not seem able to keep a long budget and flexibility under the anti-propaganda organized by Shiite rivals before the pressure of the year, so sometimes rushed to the hardline statements against Sunnis, while everyone waits for a chapter of internal dialogue. Head of government, which is strong and popular wide returned after Washington visit Ansarth in Mosul, trying to defend himself sometimes using a radical Shiite speech sometimes, to respond to the propaganda counter, and prepare for the season elections, but that did not calm his Shiite rivals, and raised the suspicion of his Sunni partners and the Kurds, and will leave scenarios the conflict is open to all possibilities and give rise to widespread concern at all. He accused Prime Minister Abadi points against the release of his lies about the bombings in Baghdad did not get to weaken. Abadi said after the bombing of a group calling lies, and often speaks of emotion tone is unusual for Sunni leaders abroad, accusing them of moving the armed rebellion that destroyed their cities and the abandonment of their audience, and then move to accommodation in hotels, and stressing that they will not be allowed to return to the country. MP for a coalition of state law Kazem Sayedai said that all the joints of the Iraqi state needs to interrogate and eradicate corruption because it has spread, accusing political parties to hold cheap deals in past interrogations of whether or not the process. He said Sayedai on Monday that the Iraqi Council of Representatives of all political mass move away from the issue of cheap deals that unfortunately extremely reliable in some scrolling or not the number of interrogations process. He Sayedai that some people today trying to raise some of the convictions here and there is the issue of withdrawal of confidence from the Electoral Commission and in other interviews to come, and then, this approach left the House of Representatives under the influence of political parties and some influential within the political blocs. He Sayedai said that, members of parliament, they have to put a real legal value in terms of interrogations, stressing that, all the joints of the Iraqi state needs to interrogate and eradicate rampant corruption because it became a phenomenon under the eyes and ears of the political parties. For his part, head of the political thinking center of the Iraqi Hassan al-Shammari believes that Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi goes on a strategy to neutralize opponents and strengthen diplomatic relations with states, noting that the nature of the meetings invested by the central government was largely poured on the future of Mosul after days. He said that Iran began to understand that Iraq has a sovereign decision in the region, as it respects Iraq's choices and interests at the level of external relations. Shammari said that engaging in any axis against another will cost Iraq a new mess, drawing attention to all recently that Iraq has its decision in its foreign relations, and added that he cannot deny the entry of about 5,000 extremists from Saudi Arabia to fight in Iraq, noting that there are views and parties within the understanding kingdom contributed significantly to sending extremists to Iraq. He continued, the return of relations between Saudi Arabia and Iraq will contribute to stop the parties and organizations that harm Iraq, and on the recent strike by the United States on the Syrian Hairs airport, he drew Shammari look. It represents the beginning of the application of the concept of atheist and the 20th century American. He explained that the Iraqi government and in accordance with the constitutional and legal texts cannot proceed with external scenarios, in terms of the fight against Daesh, in Mosul, and edit their regions, pointing out that, there are those trying to convey Mosul, from the national situation or the nature of the government deal with the foundations constitutional, to the arenas of conflict or paper pressure to change the path of the equation. He added that, Abadi thinks similar condition, what happened in Tikrit, Ramadi, and Fallujah in particular, this model will be applied in all cases at the level of Mosul, and that there are those who try to inflate the battle size. In Mosul, political calculations are not linked to the residents of the city of Mosul, as they are linked to the interests of the personal, at the level of local players, and even for foreign agendas, noting that Ankara one of those agendas that are trying to turn facts to their advantage. For his part, MP for the Kurdistan Democratic Party, Mahmoud Reza Amin's Journal, on Monday, said that the issue of striking corruption is one of the important issues that must be given priority to it by the Iraqi government. He added, it has to be rooting out corruption from its source, not only of the parties, as the size of the corruption affects not only an import's country, but affects the permanence of the state in general and the future of generations to come. He explained that the issue of outsourcing, whether approaching these actors, governments or organizations, is reprehensible to the fact that no country can help Iraq if it was not accompanied by a genuine will of the need for change. For his part, he explained the strategic expert, Confident Hashimi, that the issue of corruption from the extremely hazardous topics which entity Iraqi state threatens despite all the promises since the start of the stage of change in Iraq until the present time did not control the subject radically, and added that, Iraq's money stolen in big and go to other countries, there is no follow-up to the Iraqi money stolen abroad. He stressed the need for serious in the eradication of corruption, but there remain significant obstacles to this. Political Vaketal rejects this, and then was hired U.S. experts to prosecute corruption, and the committee began its work. He asked al-Hashimi, these committees do not have the authority to provide corrupt and the ability of the Iraqi judiciary to activate its role, and whether other nationalities will be holders of arrest if they stole the money of the country. He drew attention to the vision is clear despite the large number of slogans against Fasad, but we did not grope real action on the ground. From Agidad 77, great article and summary of it Dawn. This rocks on behalf of Abadi and for all of the Iraqi citizens, bring the guilty corrupt Nellies to justice once and for all, bring back all they stole and put it to use so it benefits those who it is rightly entitled to, the Iraqi population. Aloha. Randy 2BERDS, where Frank and teams had no study into May, while there are things that took place that were signs of encouragement, it has seemed to me that here at KTFA there has been another window that has passed by and everyone seems to be somewhat shell-shocked. My question comes from Frank's posting that it is now in A's hands. How many windows can pass by and still hold the respect of his people if their economy falls apart? And all of the investors that have poured money into their economy are expecting returns, and that will also put pressure on A. We have already seen documentation that OGM is free and that Mosul is free. I would think that with all that was done for April that A should have been happy. I agree that this progress of the process has gone so far that there is not a turning around point, but for A, if he is truly the one holding this up now, it seems it could go south for him if he is not careful. In my opinion. From Slappy Squirrel, I don't have a problem if the baton was handed back to Abadi. It does have to look to the entire world, dinar goggles off, that Iraq pulled it off and got rid of all the terrorism. I believe Abadi met all the requirements by the IMF USADJT to be given the baton of power back, and it's just a timing thing now as we wait. Mainly for Abadi to give us Mosul, a free Iraq. There's nothing holding this up, and it's not being held up. It's all centered around Abadi at this moment of time, and it's his decision when all this gets released to the world. I can